And we kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Pace and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Tuesday, February 18th, 7 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemasters Reviews. Big show this week. Sorry I couldn't have an episode yesterday. Some things came up, but I really wanted to talk about these movies this week with you. We are reviewing Captain America: Brave New World, the fourth entry in the Captain America franchise, as well as Paddington in Peru, the third film in the Paddington franchise. I say we jump right in. We're going to be starting off with Captain America: Brave New World, and joining me, first guest I've had on in a while, one of the biggest fans of the MCU I can think of. The second he saw it, he was like, "Hey, do you have a guest on?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." It's Caleb Coho. Caleb, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I have had thoughts about this movie since I walked out of the theater, so I'm really excited to get to talk with another human about this movie. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited. I didn't realize I was your first guest of the year or anything. I'm even more honored now. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can't remember the last time I had a guest on. I started just doing them more solo, but I do love just talking with people about these movies. I just love having that discussion. I say we jump right into it. Captain America: Brave New World, directed by Julius Ornaw. Like I said, this is the fourth entry in the MCU. I don't have the exact number for films in the MCU, but we've been going on for a while, guys. And we pick up on Sam Wilson, played by Anthony Mackie. He has taken on the role of Captain America from Steve Rogers after Steve Rogers went into retirement. And he was approached by Thunderbolt Ross, now played by Harrison Ford, picking up the role from William Hurt, rest in peace. And Thunderbolt Ross essentially tells him, "Hey, I want to think about starting the Avengers again." Sam Wilson is kind of like, "I'm not sure about that. Do I want to just be answering to you, even though I already am answering to you right now? Don't ask about it. Never really talked about." And then at a White House dinner, some things goes on, and Captain America is on a mission to figure out who is trying to attack the president. Coho, what have been your opinions? I'm not going to say what have been your opinions on the MCU. Let's just say, what have been your opinions on Captain America and the character of Falcon thus far?
So it's I feel like a lot of this conversation about this movie is going to be really hard to talk about without addressing the state of the MCU, because I think it is very much.
I think that is very fair. Let's talk about the current state of the MCU. I think that is the most interesting thing to.
I agree. I think this movie kind of exactly pins where we are in the MCU as a problem. Because I think Captain America: Brave New World, in theory, should be a great Captain America adventure. It feels very much like they want to get back to Winter Soldier basics of we're going to get back to the heart of this character. He's patriotic, but he's always dealing with the issues of the current political state of the MCU. They usually give us a big, wide view of where we are in the universe at that point in time. Winter Soldier gave you a good look back. Civil War, most notably, kind of pulls you back and really shows you where we are in the MCU. And it really sucks, because I think Sam Wilson is a really good character and has been a really good character thus far, kind of quietly. From his introduction to the Winter Soldier to the way they grow him out with the events of Civil War, and then the Falcon and the Winter Soldier miniseries most recently really did a lot to further that character in a really deep and emotional way, which made me excited to see him helm his own movie. And I didn't realize this movie, to the detriment of my mom, who came and saw it with me, would be so reliant on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show without doing anything with any of the character arcs within it. This movie feels like it's rehashing all of his character arcs from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier miniseries in a 2-hour movie, because not spoiling the miniseries, but to kind of give you a quick run through if you haven't watched it, that whole miniseries is about him becoming Captain America. The conflict of, am I worthy to hold the shield? Am I worthy to follow Steve Rogers? And am I the right person for the right time in this job of being the mascot of this country? And it was so weird to me to have him be in that place where he gets the red, white, and blue winged suit and the shield, and he's ready to roll. And this movie starts strong in it, where he is Captain America on missions, doing stuff, and I'm like, cool, this is kind of a great start.
It's a cool opening scene. It's very reminiscent of the other Captain America movies, where you see him on a mission. He's taking out these really cool criminals. When I saw the opening scene, I was like, I think we're in for something good here.
Exactly. It starts off with I'm not going to say like a amazing action sequence, but it's like, it feels like a modern day equivalent of like the Lumerian Star Raid from Winter Soldier.
Yes.
Where we're giving you Captain America at his best, fighting what you think are going to be like minor villains that kind of like Batroc the Leaper level. Like, hey, we're showing you fan service by bringing these small time Captain America rogues in to show you that Captain America can beat people up and do stuff like that. And from that kind of point on, the emotional arc of Sam Wilson weirdly becomes, am I worthy to be Captain America if I don't have the serum and if I'm not Steve Rogers? Which is the identical arc of what he just went through the last time we saw him in the MCU. And it left me completely baffled by what the relationship is between the television and the movies, from what Feige initially set out to do with the new version of the MCU and the multiverse saga, to kind of give like a digestible bite of where I'm at, and I'll throw it back to you. What I said earlier about it kind of being a microcosm that perfectly kind of sums up where we are as a franchise is that there are so many good ideas. There are so many member-berry kind of things where you're like, oh, I remember the Incredible Hulk. I remember these characters from before. I remember Thaddeus Ross. I remember, Betty Ross and Samuel Stearns and all these characters from before. And I remember, oh, Winter Soldier, you're giving me the same flavors of political intrigue, sort of like a thriller, of like a conspiracy, but you're not actually giving me that. You're telling me that's what this movie is. And that's what this whole saga has been, is we're telling you what we're doing while giving you no substance of individual stories, and then shoving cameos and shoving things you remember in your face. And this was weird because it doesn't use the multiverse to bring in cameos. It used just characters from phase one that we haven't seen really in a long time, and made you nostalgic for the beginnings of the MCU, which I thought was a weird, baffling move, because Endgame kind of perfectly does that, but more as a celebration of everything we've done. And Brave New World is like using the multiverse saga pattern of showing you cameos and remembering this and fan service for things that existed in the franchise already and just haven't been touched on in a decade plus. And it was so weird to me to watch this movie and have it tell me what it was. And I'm watching it going, when is this going to become what I think it wants to be?
Yeah. Going into this movie, I had heard a lot behind the scenes that this was kind of a mess in the post-production space of, like, so much of the movie is reshot. So many of the stuff was like kind of muddled together in order to try to give us a more watchable film. Because, like, I heard the cut we didn't see was like borderline, like it would have been the worst thing the MCU ever put out. And my whole philosophy on reshoots is, I don't care if your movie has reshoots, as long as if the product I get at the end of the day is good. Rewrite it as many times as you need to. Watching this, I can totally see how much of a mess the MCU is behind the scenes right now, and how much of a mess filming this movie was. Just on the surface, you can clearly tell when certain things were reshot. The green screen is awful in this movie. Like, there was a point at the end of the movie where just Sam Wilson is standing in front of a bunch of like trees and cherry blossoms, and it's laughable that this like huge big budget blockbuster, you are seeing this shot that is so cheap. But just to talk about like what you were talking about with bringing back all these characters, this movie is not just a sequel to it's not only the fourth Captain America movie. It is a sequel to the Incredible Hulk. It is a sequel to Eternals. This isn't really spoiling if you've been keeping track with the MCU. We are bringing in more things from the Fox deal, so we're getting more things from the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, from the Fantastic Four comics, and you just feel so cluttered when at the heart of it, you can clearly tell that what this movie should be about is about Sam Wilson on this political intrigue adventure. But like, well, it's fun to see things like the President of the United States be brought into the MCU, where we're kind of talking about like real world politics. Something that also kind of frustrated me is how tame the politics weirdly did feel. Like Harrison Ford is a very good actor, and like what I will say, there's this one great scene towards the beginning of the movie where he's about to make this really great speech, and he's like clearly shaking backstage. And like throughout the movie, we learned that like Thunderbolt Ross is going through like personal like physical health issues, and then when he goes out to do the speech, he's immediately like in his full-on presidential mode. Harrison Ford is a great actor; he can do this, and it's really fun to see him in the MCU. Still kind of prefer William Hurt, but just like it doesn't go much far beyond beyond that. The United States is in conflict with Japan because they couldn't they wanted to do China, but you don't want to offend anyone. It like and when I think back to Winter Soldier and Civil War, those weren't like the harshest political commentaries, but they felt a lot more serious because they kept it so character driven. I just don't really care about the characters, minus maybe Sam Wilson, because Anthony Mackie is a good actor.
I think the big problem between Winter Soldier and this, and we're going to use that comparison a lot because that is clearly what they want it to be, is the new Winter Soldier, is that Winter Soldier had a clear idea of what the heart of that movie is. That movie is about someone, a man at a time, yearning for the past in a future that he doesn't recognize. That is the core conceit of Captain America as a character in the MCU, and the Winter Soldier is a direct sequel to the first Avenger in that way. The events of the Avengers do inform this character. It informs the situation he is in, but the character that he is now, and the character that he is, moving towards is propelled by that arc. And Brave New World suffers, like I said, from that problem of rehashing an arc he already been through. And Sam Wilson only really has, as far as we could tell, that one sort of story to tell of earning the role of Captain America. And I really wanted to see him grow into the role of Captain America in this movie, because I saw why he takes the shield. I saw him decide that's who he was. I saw him grow into that over the course of a miniseries. And I get that, like, you want to make them work hand in hand, but the fact of the matter is people didn't watch Falcon and Winter Soldier, so they want to make a movie that covers that ground, except you made the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So you made the story. So you have to evolve that story, and you have to make it work seamlessly for people who didn't watch the show. And I feel like it wanted to do both. It wanted to be a standalone Captain America 4 that sort of is a reboot while continuing off of the events of Endgame and feel like a Captain America movie, but also acknowledge the fact that he's already Captain America in this movie. He already has a suit. He has a Falcon. He has Isaiah Bradley. And if you go into this movie, you have no idea who those people are if you didn't watch the show. And the other part of it that really bothers me is the antagonists of this, right? The antagonists of this movie are confused and cluttered from a narrative perspective, because you from the first opening minutes of this film, they tell you what the conspiracy is and who's behind it from the first 5 minutes, which is annoying and frustrating for a conspiracy thriller. And additionally, you spend the whole movie showing us the president is trying to do good and trying to turn around his life while constantly telling us that there's a reason we shouldn't trust him. Even though we have a history of knowing not to trust him, he's been the bad guy of previous films. So what I really wanted out of this, or what I think really would have worked better, is the idea that the president is just a bad guy. Because the movie show just went into it that we know he's a bad guy. It's a bad thing that this guy's the president, because the Sokovia Accords, back in action, he would reinstate that shit immediately as the president. Like, you have to build positive forward momentum off the choices you're making from the past, which is why I don't mind things like Celestial Island being a location and adamantium being introduced as a plot element. And I think those things don't need to be the entire focus of the movie, but I think they can be really substantial plot elements, like the location of a final fight and being the catalyst to create this element that then is the MacGuffin that we're going after. I think that helps forward the world and connect things that we've seen, which I thought those elements were good. I thought adamantium was good. I thought using Celestial Island was great. But what bothers me is that all my villains in this movie are explained to me through dialogue. Other people are telling me that the leader is smart. The leader is telling me that he is smart and doing it by saying numbers that mean nothing to me. That's the way that the MCU is showing me this guy is smart. Instead of like showing it to me through by constructing an actual plot, an actual whole mystery and a thing that this character wants and how he does it to get what he needs. Like, it's clear they had an idea of it and they didn't know how to do it, and they ended up just kind of telling me that he's smart. And those were the things that bothered me most as a viewer of the movie, not just as an MCU fan, but as a viewer watching I could see what they wanted, and I was being told what it was, and I wasn't going on this journey at that point.
And speaking of the leader is played by Tim Blake Nelson. If you've seen the trailers, you know he's returning. That's not a spoiler. There is a scene in this movie. By the way, Tim Blake Nelson is a very good actor. I think he does a serviceable enough job in this film. There is a scene towards the end of this movie where he is in Washington, D.C., and he is just in the public, just talking to Sam Wilson. And you have this guy with this giant, oversized, like, cranium brain just talking with their main character out in the open for 30 seconds before the armed guards finally surround him. The second that guy pulls off his hood, he is getting tackled immediately. And I just found that really, really humorous. Talking about some of the new characters, I think there's one shining spot in this movie, and that is Carl Lumbly as Isaiah. Every single scene this guy is in is incredible. He is an actor I would love to see return. I'm not sure if he was in Falcon and Winter Soldier, but he is. Yeah, we are told that he has had this history with Sam Wilson. He's had a little bit of a trepidatious past. He's trying to get his life back together, and when we meet him, he has. And the places where he goes and where that character goes, I think him and Anthony Mackie have incredible chemistry. Every time they had a scene together, that was the highlight of the movie for me. That is why I cannot say this movie is completely wasted. Every other character I just did not care for. Sam Wilson is given his own Falcon in this movie by the name of Joaquin, played by Danny Ramirez. Did not give a shit about this character. And this is like the poster child for like dumb comic relief MCU character. Even though he's not like super comic relief, like we are told this guy is supposed to be like this like stone cold badass killer. And it's really just like if people just started telling, hey, Payson Johnson is a stone cold badass killer, and was like, really? Like, this guy just seems like a really normal guy. There is once Joaquin and Sam start going on their mission, we have another agent by the name of Ruth, played by Shira Haas. She's we learned that she was trained in the Red Room. Weirdly short. Like watching this movie, I was like, she looks like a tiny person, and I was just like, is this on purpose? But like, yeah, her character didn't really do anything for me. Giancarlo Esposito plays one of the criminals that Sam Wilson apprehends at the beginning of the movie. Wasted. Completely wasted. And it's Giancarlo freaking Esposito. How do you do that with an actor that great? Koa, what do you think about the supporting characters in this film?
So I love Isaiah Bradley. I do want to like implore people watch The Falcon and the Winter Soldier because it is a good miniseries. It is a very good miniseries, and I stand by that should have been the movie. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you can cut that down into a 2.5-hour movie, and it's a very good Captain America sequel. And you should have taken this and drawn it out into a 6-episode miniseries on Disney Plus and done it that way to explore all the things you want to do. But Isaiah Bradley is one of the best parts of that show. His story, his origins, the way his heartbreak is displayed, and the payoff to it at the end of the season.
Hearing that he's in that show makes me want to watch that show more because he is that good.
He's incredible. Like, you see how Bucky knows him and introduces him to Sam, and from there, that's how that relationship is born. And Isaiah Bradley is such a really incredible character from the show, and is completely wasted because they don't get into his history. They just call him the Forgotten Cap. Which I think is a disrespectful throwaway term to kind of just glaze over the really tragic history that character has. Joaquin is a minor character in the miniseries. You get his origin, and now that he's Falcon, it's like, I don't know. I don't understand why there needs to be a new Falcon. That to me is something that I feel like they did so that Sam could have a Bucky. because they don't want to put Bucky with him all the time, which I think is a mistake. They should keep Bucky with Captain America. It should be Sebastian Stan and Anthony Mackie. They should be a two-hander all the time. Those two have perfect chemistry, and they're so fun, and you can tell they're really close in real life. They should stay a duo. So Joaquin, it feels like a hollow Bucky that they don't really know who he is yet, and they're just trying to give him a Sam, like an equivalent to a Captain America sidekick that Sam sort of was leading up to that. Ruth is the weirdest no-cell character in the history of film.
I did not vibe at all. Like, what is going on?
The entire, like, there's so much history about what that character was supposed to be and what they wanted to do before reshoots. And from the jump, I just think that character is a mistake to include in the story. I think it's too charged. I think that's a character whose origins in the comics create a problem when you adapt it because everyone's going to look and bring that history with it to it. I think there are existing characters that you've already created in the MCU in Phase 4 that could fill that bill and set up Thunderbolts by doing so. You could totally have had Yelena Belova be that part. I think that just totally fits right in. You just bring in Florence Pugh, you have instant box office, it clicks. I think, to me, what's crazy is that they have set up this Valentina Allegra de Fontaine character and these Thunderbolt things and the setup across the shows and movies and little things. And it's obviously leading to Thunderbolts. And it's crazy that this movie is not the catalyst to Thunderbolts. Like, it's crazy to me that Ross's security advisor is not Valentina Allegra. And it's crazy that Valentina does not sick Black Widow on Sam and Falcon when they're running on the run after everything with Isaiah. Like, I just think it's crazy to me that there's, like, the MCU has built all this stuff right now actively in Phases 4 and 5, and they're using it as set dressing and not as actual plot elements to develop these characters or progress these stories. It's like they forget they have some of these characters. It's like they forget Yelena's a character. It's like they forget that Valentina exists, and they're like, oh, Thunderbolts exists, and that's the payoff. And it's like, well, you reshot the hell out of this movie, and it was moved before. It takes 3 scenes. It takes exactly 3 scenes to build that subplot. And if you're going to reshoot the final fight, you just call Florence Pugh and have her show up for like 4 or 5 reaction shots. It's all you need, because that's all Ruth literally did. Have her punch a green screen 3 times and give her $2 million and say, have a great day. Like, it's the easiest fix in the world to me. I think Ruth is a character that serves no purpose and ultimately does nothing except cause controversy that was unneeded for the movie already going in. It's so frustrating. And Samuel Stearns, real quick, just to say, I think that his original comic look is really iconic to me. I think in an age where we are comfortable with the goofiness of comics visually in the post-Nolan world. Yeah. Now that we're like removed from the Dark Knight and making everything realistic, and the Snyderverse where everything looks realistic, and now we've gotten to the point where we literally did the Flash, where everyone's wearing comic accurate goofy suits, or Suicide Squad and Gunn making things look comic accurate and giving you what you like on screen, that we didn't just do the leader, like with the big green head and everything, which is crazy. We did MODOK comic accurate. We did comic accurate MODOK, which is a much dumber design than the leader.
Yeah, and I will admit,
looked terrible.
Yeah, MODOK looked terrible, and the argument could have been made they should have changed that, but they went for it, and I will give them credit for that.
Exactly. I give them all the credit in the world for going for MODOK, and I don't understand why they didn't go for the leader, because the leader's design is gross in a way that's uncomfortable, and also doesn't make sense with where we last left him physically. Like, if you go back and watch the scene from the Incredible Hulk, his head's expanding upward in the shot. It's expanding upward. So what physically means is it expanded upward and popped like a pimple.
Yeah.
Is what happened, because now it's just this weird exposed brain head that looks really gross. But I think it is well done. It's a well done look. I just think it's the wrong choice for that character. I think Tim Blake Nelson is doing his absolute best with what he's given. I think he's such a great actor, and that's such a fun character to have him get the chance to come back and do. But it's a total missed opportunity. Like, to me, you've already brought back Hulk characters with She-Hulk. You brought back Abomination. You did She-Hulk. The fact that the leader was not the payoff of his introduction being the end of She-Hulk and that tying into Captain America by then making him the bad guy in Captain America, like, it feels like the MCU, with me explaining all these missed opportunities, is sort of explaining the problem. It's that they are not looking at what they have. They're not assessing the board of what they have and making connections to make every movie feel like part of a puzzle. And rather, it feels like every movie is a separate individual puzzle piece to a different puzzle. Like Multiverse of Madness and No Way Home connect, kind of. They kind of have similar pieces. You can't quite fit them in. There's a little bit of a gap, but they're close enough. And then Captain America over here is a corner piece that doesn't match the rest of this puzzle, but there's a little jagged edge where there's that little line of color where you're like, that kind of could match this piece over here. Like, it's when you're looking at all these pieces and you're trying to make them work, and you have 4 different puzzles mixed in one box, and you're trying to make them fit. And that's how it feels the current state of the MCU is. And it's frustrating. It feels like Feige really needed to take out, the buzzsaw and shape these puzzle pieces more straight to make it all fit. Because they're telling us where we're going, and we know where we're going. And the leaks have gotten so bad for Marvel post Endgame that we could probably tell you the plot of Avengers: Secret Wars at this point. If we could probably guess everything that's going to happen in their Endgame level event that's happening less than a decade after Endgame, and it makes no sense how we're going to get there. It feels like we're jumping. It would be like if we did Captain America: The First Avenger, and then we did Thor: The Dark World, and then we did Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and then we did Thor: Ragnarok, but then we also randomly just decided to do Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania with no setup, and now we're doing Avengers: Endgame without Infinity War.
Yeah, that is the craziest thing to me. Is next year we have do we have Secret Wars or do we have
Doomsday? Is next year.
Doomsday is next year. This is the Infinity War that for the past almost 10 years we've been building up to. That is crazy. Like, we do not feel like we are in any sort of crescendo because the MCU is trying to gain its quality back, but every single time it keeps regressing, and we're like, well, we can't keep building. And like, I know there have been some things. I know COVID probably had a big part that affected that. I know the Jonathan Majors thing probably had a huge thing where Doctor Doom 100%. Was not the major thing, and I will give them some leeway there. But still, the fact that this is the ending of Phase, like what Age of Ultron was to the Infinity Saga, this is what Brave New World is supposed to be to the Multiverse Saga. And I'm like, what are we doing at this point? And I'm like, the lack of focus, I think, is just so frustrating. And speaking of the lack of focus, we need to talk about the editing. I mentioned that you could clearly tell that this was a reshot. You can tell every single thing where actors came back in to pick up scenes. And the editing, specifically in the action scenes, are brutal. Full respect to Julius Orna. He directed Loose, which is a movie I really liked. I have not seen Cloverfield Paradox. I've heard that is not good. He was not ready for the big leagues. Like, I'm sorry, buddy, you were not ready to, like, he was not ready to handle a blockbuster of this size. The scene where Sam is rushing through the White House trying to find who was the one that shot Ross. That was horribly edited. I had no idea what was going on. There are like 3 or 4 perspective changes where you just completely lose where our characters are. Full credit to them reshooting the final action scene. I'm just gonna say it. The trailer spoiled it. I thought the Red Hulk fight would have happened at like the middle of the movie and would have been like Hulkbuster versus Hulk and Avengers: Age of Ultron. That is the final set piece of the movie, and I will give him credit. That is a cool action scene. But the one that preceded that, where we have Sam Wilson and the new Falcon in the air fighting these missiles, go back and watch the original Iron Man and go back and watch that air training scene and see how much better it looks than this. It is staggering.
I think it's telling when you look at the MCU trailers that we have gotten for the last, we'll say, half decade. We'll say since 2017, and how Endgame managed to put out a trailer without anything from Acts 2 or 3. Yeah. It was entirely from that first act, and it shattered opening weekend records, made $1 billion opening weekend. It was the biggest movie of all time. And you look at the editing of those trailers. Infinity War doesn't show you really much of anything from the third act, of the real third act. Ragnarok, it really focuses on Act 2 on Sakaar. Black Panther really focused Act 1, where you got all the establishing shots and fights. Like every trailer did a great job of hiding a punch.
You will usually get like one major shot in the trailers of the final scene. Like I think of Infinity War, it ends with with them all running in Wakanda, and like Ragnarok. I believe in the trailer it did show the scene of Thor coming down on the bridge, but that's usually it. It shows no context. You have all the context. Like this is not a spoiler of what happens with Red Hulk. You know what happens.
Exactly, and that really drives me nuts. Is that the state of the MCU at this point? Because even taking into account things they've done in this saga, No Way Home doesn't have a shot.
No.
Outside of the first half of Act 2. Anything post the first half of Act 2 with Sandman's introduction, not the trailer. You don't know. They packed so many punches. Multiverse of Madness packed some punches because they were able to hide some stuff. Even Love and Thunder managed to keep their entire third act out of the trailer and sell the movie. And I think that's crazy. Like Black Panther Wakanda Forever is only the first act. Like only the first act of that almost 3-hour movie is in that trailer. And that means there's a lot to those movies that they're able to kind of keep. Red Hulk should have been a total surprise to everyone in this movie.
If Red Hulk was a surprise, the moment when we start hinting at it would have been the coolest shit in the world. Like the second where he starts showing like, oh, something's not up, because the comic people will know, like, I know where this is going. The regular audience, like when you finally have that payoff, will be like, oh, this is what we're doing, let's go.
Like I think that if they had narratively without the trailers telling you, that whole setup of him taking pills just seems like he's scared of dying of a heart attack. It just means his mortality that we've had explored before is on display because this is the most we've ever had of him as a character since the first heart attack.
Yeah.
So even me as a fan would probably sit there and be like, well, they're showing this a lot, but they're really just emphasizing that he thinks he's going to die. And then to have him be the Red Hulk in the third act of a non-Hulk movie would have blown my mind because I would have never thought they'd have done that, because it's unexpected for a Captain America movie to introduce one of the bigger Hulk villains, and with the bad guy of the Captain America movie being a major Hulk villain. And that's really a weird thing to me, is that a lot of Hulk villains, a lot of Hulk characters are in this. No Hulk. That's weird to me. It's so weird to me that there wasn't like a end of Act 2, Celestial Island happens, and they're like, all right, Sam, and end of Act 2 happens, and the leader's revealed as the villain, and Sam doesn't go, I got to make a call. And call Bruce Banner and be like, who is Samuel Stearns? And have that be the moment where Sam you get a Mark Ruffalo cameo, and you get to know everything about Samuel Stearns, and you tie it all back in. You remind people who this guy from The Incredible Hulk was. Yeah. And then that leaves the door open for when the Red Hulk shows up in the third act, and Cap has to go fight him. He's able to round up a crew. He's able to bring Yelena. If you did that subplot, he's able to get, Falcon, Isaiah Bradley, and have a Hulk with him. Because then you also get to set up a pseudo Avengers by the end of that movie, which seems like his arc is going to be from what it sounds like in the first act, where he's like, I want you to rebring back the Avengers. Wouldn't you think that movie, in a way, his arc should be about actually making the Avengers on his terms with his people who he needs? Wouldn't you think that would be the move?
Yeah, that is another major thing. Is this movie is all about Ross wanting Sam to start the Avengers again, or like start moving towards that, which makes sense considering where we are in the franchise of like, yo, we need to start teaming up again in order to fight, like, because we know Doctor Doom is around the corner. And by the end of this movie, we're kind of still in the same place, except for the fact that Sam is like, well, I guess I'm Captain America, like, without spoiling anything, like, that's it. And like, yeah, with like, I understand having faith in your audience, but if you're calling back to the Incredible Hulk of all movies, you need to remind some people of like, oh, this is what we're doing. Like, that is the movie that has been the most disconnected film from the MCU to this point. You can't suddenly say like, okay, everything in that movie matters. Like,
exactly. And down to the song that he sort of plays that becomes the theme song for the leader being a reference to his screen name from The Incredible Hulk with Mr. Blue.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It was such a weird thing to me, whereas like, that's a very, it's you have to make it obvious in the way where No Way Home has all these villains remind you who they are by kind of saying their catchphrases a lot. Like Doc Ock being like, the power of the sun in the palm of my hand, like 10 times in No Way Home, which probably is a little over the top, but I don't give a shit. I love Doc Ock. I love No Way Home. I don't care. Like, if you do it well enough, it doesn't matter. And that leads me to kind of my biggest point. is that Brave New World, at the end of the day, doesn't have a purpose. It functionally doesn't have a purpose in the story, except to cinematically introduce you to Sam Wilson as Captain America. But they don't set him up as a leader of an Avengers team. He's they just set up, you get an adventure with him with the shield, and he's Captain America, and we have a Captain America in the MCU, and also some other minor details are there now to be like, oh, we referenced Eternals and we referenced some other stuff. And it, like you said, all these movies still feel disconnected because no one's shown up or teamed up. Thor did a whole adventure, and the only people who showed up were the Guardians of the Galaxy, and that was to pay off Endgame, and that's maybe the most connection we have so far. Because Guardians 3 doesn't mention Thor: Love and Thunder.
No. Oh, Guardians 3 is maybe the most like self-contained MCU movie ever. It's just about ending the Guardians story.
It is. Guardians 3 is entirely James Gunn going, I'm not interacting with the future. I'm ending my piece and getting out. And I was like, cool, that's fine. Because we don't know what we're doing with the Guardians. So end the Guardians and we'll figure it out later. And that's my problem. Spider-Man is ending what they set up in the previous saga and giving them a new status quo and leaving it open for them to decide what to do in the future. Doctor Strange kind of builds off that, sets up a multiverse, and ends in a place where he has no definable place to go, and we don't know what his future looks like, but he has a new status quo going forward towards the future. Thor, a self-contained adventure that Thor only goes on, and at the end of the day, he has a new status quo that is open-ended for an open-ended future. Black Panther, we establish a new Black Panther where nothing really changes except we have a new Black Panther and their status quo is changed and open-ended for the future. Yes, and that's kind of every single movie has done this where there's no discernible place for them to go except for, weirdly, Ant-Man. Ant-Man's the only one where his story ends in a place where he's not in a good place. He ends worried about his future because of a guy named Kang, which is the most set up we've ever gotten for a big bad. Like Thanos and the Infinity Saga appears 3-4 times tops.
3 times, I think.
Or Infinity War, where you have the Smile, you have the Guardians, you have the end of Age of Ultron, and you have the ship at the end of Ragnarok.
Yeah, you're right.
It's the 4 moments where you get the Thanos buildup, but at the end of the day, every movie in that saga has some sort of a purpose. But it's not about getting to Thanos. That's what I think is the big difference. Is Thor: The Dark World's MacGuffin, it introduces the Reality Stone. But that movie's not about the Reality Stone for Thanos. It's about a different villain who wants this thing, and it's a totally different story. And Guardians of the Galaxy is about the Power Stone, with a totally villain wanting it for a totally different story, but it still introduces a lot of people who are going to be important to Thanos. And Age of Ultron introduces the Mind Stone, building off of the first Avengers movie. And at the end of the day, Thanos is not involved at all, but it still brings up important exposition so that when Thanos gets here, we know exactly where each thing is. We have history and story for every character who's involved in the story and every MacGuffin that's involved in the story for the bigger MacGuffin, and we know what every single thing does. The Infinity War is 2.5 hours of go mode. It is 2.5 hours of we know the stakes, we know the characters. It's time to roll. This is what you've been waiting for. Here's all the action scenes you've been dreaming about. We're rolling. And that's why Infinity War is so impressive as a film. And that's why the Multiverse Saga feels so weird, because every single movie in the Multiverse Saga feels like, Kang's introduced and he's going to be the big bad. He is like, it's like if you introduced Thanos in Thor: The Dark World as the bad guy that Thor fights. And Thor beats him. So if Thor beats him, then your entire saga going forward is Thanos just got beat by Thor, so what's he going to do against the whole Avengers?
No, and like
that out the window entirely.
This is completely off topic. Kang should have killed Ant-Man at the end of Quantumania. That would have made so much more stakes. They were never going to do that. Okay, completely off topic. I'm sorry, but yeah, I agree with that. I just needed to say that. Yeah. Okay, but I think we're just about to wrap up. But yeah, how this fits into the rest of the MCU, like, yeah, there are references. I don't want to spoil those, but I was like okay with every single character that was kind of brought back. The post-credit scene, I think, is so lazy. Of like, really, this is how we're setting up for Doomsday. I think this is so stupid. Real quick, I'm just gonna say it. What was going on with Sebastian Stan's hair? what was going on with Bucky's hair. I'm sorry. Did you notice that was a wig?
And that is the most egregious reshoot scene in the whole movie to me. Where you can tell Bucky's not supposed to be in this movie. And people were really upset that Bucky was not going to be in the movie. And they were like, we need to have this moment where Sam has to deal with everything he just dealt with in the miniseries again, and we need the clarifying point. And who did he have the clarifying point with in the miniseries? Oh, that's right, Bucky. So Bucky and him literally rehashed the exact scene from the miniseries where Bucky, almost verbatim from the miniseries, tells him that Sam is special not because he needs the serum, and because Steve chose him, and Steve did things not because he had the serum, but because he was a good man. Literally reiterates the exact same points again for the audience. I like Bucky. I like that Bucky's in it. It makes no sense that he's about to be a senator. What the shit was that?
How was this guy? I'm sorry. How was he elected?
How is that a thing? That's okay. He can't be Captain America because his mind control abilities cannot be trusted. So what would be the natural next thing? Put him in a greater position of power as a U.S. senator. What are we doing? How does that make sense for Bucky? Because now because we need him to be involved in the Thunderbolts without being a recruited assassin because he's no longer even a combatant at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He's retired by the end of that show. Essentially, he's kind of sidelined. So what are we going to do to bring him back in Thunderbolts? Oh, yeah, make him one of the fucking founders as a senator? What are we doing?
That's always the double-edged sword when you bring in real-life politics to this comic book world, is because you still have comic logic going on, and it's so much more noticeable. That was frustrating. I'm going to take the spoiler alert. Yeah,
can we keep the spoiler for 1 second? Because I cannot talk about the post-credit scene without spoiling it, and I have to get this out. So the post-credit scene is legitimately the most egregious decision they've made in the MCU in a decade. It is worse than any scene in any. It's worse than any scene in Quantumania. It is worse than any scene in Eternals. It is worse than any scene in any of these movies, and I can't stand it. It's lazy. It's lazy. It's lazy. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. Okay. I say we are you good to head into scores?
Yeah, I'll just say my score is 5. I actually have to run. 5.
Yeah. 0 to 10. Coho is giving it a 5. I'm gonna show it. Yeah. So where are they? Holy crud. Okay. Yeah. Coho is giving it a 5 out of 10. That is average here on the Cinemaster review scale. I'm gonna go a little lower. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 out of 10. I think it was actually kind of a bad MCU movie. It's easily on the lower tier. There are some good things I like. I like Anthony Mackie. I like Carl Lumbly, especially their chemistry together. I think the actions, the final set piece action scene, while you can tell it was reshot, I think it is well directed. But yeah, other than that, I think just you can tell how muddled this film is. It has 5 credited writers. You can tell there were way too many cooks in the kitchen. And by the end of the movie, I just asked the worst thing you can ask in a big franchise like this: what was the point of this? So yeah, if you were a diehard fan of the MCU, I would recommend going to see it. If not, you can easily skip for this one and wait for it on streaming. But yeah, Koho did have to step out, and I just want to thank him for coming in. Really happy that I was able to have a guest for this review. But as we move on to the second review of the night, that being Paddington in Peru. Probably going to go a lot quicker because it's just me. This is the third film in the Paddington franchise. It is directed by Doug Wilson. The first Paddington film that is not directed by Paul King. As you might have remembered, Paul King did Wonka last year. This film, we open on the titular character of Paddington. He is still staying with the Brown family. The parents played by Hugh Bonneville, and this time Emily Mortimer replacing Sally Hawkins from the first 2 films. Paddington gets a letter from his aunt saying that she is in Peru and saying she is in Peru and she wants Paddington to come and visit her. When he gets to Peru, he finds a retirement home for bears, which I was so obsessed with. The second this movie introduced that Aunt Lucy has been staying in a retirement home is hilarious, and it's only bears. So sweet, so charming. And but Aunt Lucy has gone missing. Reverend Mother, played by Olivia Colman, the nun that runs the retirement home, says she just went off in the wilderness, and Paddington and his family decide that they are going to go and find her with the help of Hunter Cabot, played by Antonio Banderas. He is a treasure hunter out in Peru, and he is trying to find an ancient Incan treasure, and he thinks that Paddington can help him. I love those first two Paddington films. I think they are the pinnacle of what family films can be. I just think the feeling and the charm that those movies just exude is is just so charming and so lovely. There aren't too many like there are no adult jokes in those movies. There are no mature themes. It's really just like, how can we make a movie for all ages and all families that everyone can enjoy and everyone can leave with a smile on their face? And that is what those two films do. Paddington 2, it is like, I don't think I've ever met a person that doesn't love that movie, because it is just so joyous and so cheerful, just absolutely lovely. And I think the disappointing thing is, while I did enjoy this movie, it doesn't have nearly the same charm as those first two films. And I think you can tell that is due to the absence of Paul King. Wonka was a movie that I thought was way better than it had any right to be. That was a prequel to Willy Wonka. How do you make that work? Paul King made that work. Paul King made those first two Paddingtons so just so like relaxing to watch. And this film just doesn't have that feel. Douglas Wilson is someone that hasn't really directed anything too major and too big. And while he still is able to take those pieces that Paul King set up and create still a charming adventure, something doesn't feel right and something does feel missing as I'm watching this movie. I think the major takeaway with this film is it feels like a way bigger story in the sense of stake and in the sense of scale. Most of the Paddington films, they always take place in England. They usually center around an object that one of the villains is trying to attain. Nicole Kidman plays the villain in the first movie. Hugh Grant plays the villain in the second movie. So good as Phoenix Buchanan. And in this movie, Antonio Banderas plays the villain, and he's just trying to find this treasure, and he just needs Paddington's help. And I just think the whole sense of like this weird adventure take, like I enjoy adventure movies, but this doesn't feel like what people go to these Paddington films for. Like I don't need this huge adventure. I just need like Paddington just dealing with this small thing that affects his family and trying to figure out how to solve these issues with all these people and figuring out how to make their lives better. And I just think like this huge sense of scale, and like this seems like a more expensive version of the Paddington films, and it just didn't feel like the same. Like, for example, when Paddington decides to go to Peru, there is this giant musical number performed by Olivia Colman, and it's a fun musical number. Like Olivia Colman is having the time of her life in this movie. She is excellent as Reverend Mother. She says all of her lines with the biggest smile and the biggest like customer service voice, and she is so much fun. But watching this musical number, I was just like, yeah, this just feels like we're trying to add too much and just doesn't feel. It just does not feel the same, and it lost a lot of its charm for me personally. Antonio Banderas is also very good as the villain. He's an actor I always love, and he is always someone who's willing to give 110% to all of his scenes. There's a really fun scene that he has with Paddington towards the end, where it's like this hide and seek chase scene, and Antonio Banderas is playing it with the most intense tone that an actor can play it with, and I thought that was really fun. Yeah, Antonio Banderas is excellent in this movie. Emily Mortimer, I mentioned that she replaces Sally Hawkins, and while this isn't Emily Mortimer's fault, you can very clearly tell that she is a different actress, and almost feels like she is a different character than the original Mrs. Brown, played by Sally Hawkins. Sally Hawkins is just one of the most like cheery actresses alive, and just like she has this really like calming demeanor. And this version of Miss Brown kind of feels a little bit more stoic and a little bit more stern with how she plays her character. And I was just a little disappointed with that personally. Again, I do think Emily Mortimer does a good job. I just don't think this. I think just the fact that you can very clearly tell this is a different character does leave a little bit to be desired personally. Yeah, just looking at my notes. The ending of the film, it really adds a lot of lore to the Paddington films, which if there is something I didn't need in these movies, it's extended lore and where like Paddington's family came from. But at the end of the day, it is a very sweet ending. And when this film concluded, I did feel I did have a smile on my face because I do like what it had to say about where Paddington has found his family, where he truly believes is home. And so yeah, what I will say, I think the major reason why this movie still works for me is just because the character of Paddington is so likable. He's voiced by Ben Whishaw, perfect casting as far as I'm concerned, and he just brings so much just like he just makes me want to be a good person. I know this sounds so silly with me talking about this, but just the character of Paddington in general just makes me want to go out and do good things. And while this movie is enjoyable, I was just a little bit let down that it just does not reach the heights of the other two Paddington films. I think that's about everything I wanted to say. If there is some, if I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I am still going to give it a passing grade. I am going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. Once again, you still do have those charming characters. Olivia Colman and Antonio Banderas are giving two very fun performances, but you definitely can tell that this isn't the same minds behind those that made those first two films such classics in their own right. If you do have kids, I don't think this is a bad movie to take them at all. You will not hate your time with it. But if you are looking for something that reaches the highs of those first two Paddington films, I don't think this is quite a priority that you need to make to go see it in the theater. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I'm going to take that score off. Thank you all for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video so it helps grow our channel a lot. Thank you to Coho for coming on to talk about Captain America Brave New World. We talked for almost 45 minutes, which is crazy. I cannot remember the last time I had a show go longer than like 30 minutes. And we're pushing the 50-minute mark. If you did watch this whole video, thank you so much. Next week, we are reviewing The Monkey, the new horror movie from Osgood Perkins, as well as The Unbreakable Boy. Thank you all for watching. Always happy. I think I'm going to try to get more guests on going forward. So if there is a movie coming out that you would like to come and talk with me, just let me know, and I will let you know if I get you on the show. Thank you all for watching, and remember, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.